Shattered glass catches the streetlight like broken diamonds scattered across linoleum. Blood pools beneath overturned chairs, congealing in the humid New Orleans air. A young man's body slumps against a cash register, his hand still reaching for something. Outside, red and blue lights paint the restaurant's windows in violent colors. Police tape flutters in the March breeze like prayer flags for the dead. But something is wrong with this crime scene, something that will shake New Orleans to its foundation. By dawn, local news vans circle like vultures. Channel 4, Channel 6, the Times-Picayune, all chasing the same shocking story. 3 people murdered in cold blood, including a police officer. But they don't yet know the most impossible truth of all. What the arriving officers didn't know was that one of their own had already been here as the executioner. This is a disturbing story of how Antoinette Frank became America's only female cop on death row. Opelousas, Louisiana, 1971. Antoinette Frank enters the world in a small Louisiana town where secrets fester in the humid air like mold in abandoned houses. She's a slight girl with quick eyes and quicker anger, traits that will serve her well in law enforcement if she survives her childhood. But survival comes at a terrible cost that will echo through decades. Her father, Clarence Frank, is a man whose demons find expression through his fists and worse. The abuse begins early. Physical violence that leaves bruises, sexual trauma that leaves scars invisible to the outside world. Night after night, the home that should be her sanctuary becomes a prison of terror. The psychology is textbook yet tragic. Childhood abuse rewires the developing brain, creating hypervigilant neural pathways that never fully heal. Antoinette learns to read microexpressions for danger, to anticipate violence before it strikes, to dissociate when escape isn't possible. These survival skills will later serve her in police work, but they come with devastating side effects. By adolescence, she exhibits the classic markers of complex PTSD. Emotional numbness, punctuated by explosive rage, desperate attachment to authority figures who might protect her, and an overwhelming need for control that borders on obsession. Teachers notice her volatility. Social workers open files that disappear into bureaucratic limbo. The system that should save her fails repeatedly. Her teenage years unfold in a pattern of attachment and abandonment. She seeks out older authority figures, teachers, coaches, anyone in uniform, with an intensity that makes them uncomfortable. When they inevitably distance themselves, her rage grows. The world, she concludes, is divided into predators and prey. She's determined never to be prey again. When she applies to the New Orleans Police Department in the early 1990s, the psychological evaluations flag her immediately. Dr. Philip Scoria, the department psychologist, notes dependency with hostility and potential for impulsive acting out. Failed. She reapplies 6 months later, this time better prepared to mask her symptoms. Failed again. The evaluation notes read like a prophecy, not suitable for police work. Most people would take the hint. Most people would find another career path. But Antoinette Frank isn't most people. The New Orleans Police Department in the 1990s is an institution under siege. Crime rates soar, officer retention plummets, budget constraints force lowered standards. When Frank applies a third time, the department is desperate enough to overlook the red flags in her file. They rationalize, how dangerous could one small woman be? They hand her a badge, a gun, and the authority to protect the city that couldn't protect her from her own father. The 5-pointed star feels heavy on her chest, not with responsibility, but with possibility. Finally, she has power. Finally, she belongs to something bigger than her pain. Therefore, she enters law enforcement not as a healer, but as someone whose wounds are still bleeding and who mistakes authority for healing. New Orleans East, 1994. Officer Antoinette Frank walks her beat with the swagger of someone trying to fill a uniform that feels too big. Her fellow officers keep their distance.
There's something off about her, the way she stares too long, speaks too little, and seems to catalog every slight, real or imagined. She gravitates toward Rogers Lacaze, a local drug dealer with dead eyes and easy money. He sees her vulnerability and weaponizes it. She sees his power and craves it. Their relationship becomes a feedback loop of manipulation and codependence. Her resentment toward her colleagues metastasizes. Officer Ronald Williams, her occasional partner, becomes a particular target. He's everything she isn't: respected, well-liked, genuinely committed to the job. His success feels like a judgment of her failures. Late at night, in Lacaze's apartment, thick with marijuana smoke and bitter ambition, they begin to plan. Not just robbery, revolution. A way to take what she believes the world owes her.
Therefore, her badge becomes not a symbol of justice, but a tool for the perfect crime. The Kim Ann restaurant sits on Bullard Avenue like a beacon of the American dream made manifest. The Vu family, refugees who fled Vietnam's chaos for New Orleans' promise, has poured their hearts into this modest establishment. The walls display faded photographs of Saigon, but the menu speaks of adaptation: Vietnamese pho alongside American burgers, spring rolls next to French fries. Tonight, the restaurant should be closed, but the Vu family stays late to clean and count the day's earnings. Ha Vu, 24, sits at a corner table organizing receipts, her gentle fingers sorting bills and coins with practiced efficiency. She dreams of expanding the business, maybe opening a second location. Her younger brother, Quang, just 17, sweeps the floor where customers sat hours earlier, dreaming of college, of becoming an engineer like his heroes in America. The dining room holds the comfortable quiet of honest work nearly finished. Steam still rises from the kitchen where the last dishes were cleaned. The cash register holds several $100s. Not a fortune, but enough to pay suppliers, cover rent, and maybe set aside something for the children's education. Officer Ronald Williams sits at his usual corner table, still in uniform, finishing a late dinner of pho and spring rolls. At 25, he's young enough to relate to the immigrant family's dreams, but experienced enough to understand their vulnerabilities. He knows their story: the dangerous boat journey, the refugee camps, the struggle to build something new in a foreign land. They trust him, offer him meals at cost, ask his advice about neighborhood security. The conversation flows in broken English, mixed with Vietnamese, punctuated by laughter. Williams shows him photos of his girlfriend, talks about his plans to propose. Ha Vu teases him about eating too much, warns him that he'll get fat. Gung practices his English, asking about American sports, college applications, the future he's determined to build. This is the America that works: immigrants and police officer, different backgrounds united by common dreams, trust built through shared meals and genuine conversation, community policing at its most fundamental level. At 11:47 p.m., that trust shatters. Two armed figures burst through the front door with military precision. Lacaze moves left, Frank right, weapons drawn, faces masked by shadows and adrenaline. The robbery happens with practiced efficiency. Demands for money, threats of violence, the systematic terrorizing of a family whose only crime was working late. But this isn't just robbery, it's execution. Ha Vu reaches for the phone to call for help. The first gunshot cuts her down mid-motion, her body crumpling beside the cash register she was trying to protect. Quang screams his sister's name, rushes toward her. The second shot silences him forever, his dreams of engineering dying with him on the restaurant floor he'd been sweeping moments before. Officer Williams, trained for exactly this situation, reaches for his service weapon. But training can't overcome the shock of betrayal. He recognizes one of the gunmen, not the face, hidden in shadow, but something familiar in the stance, the movement, the professional way she handles her weapon. The recognition costs him precious seconds. The third shot ends his life and his questions. 3 lives snuffed out in under 90 seconds for the contents of a cash register and the twisted satisfaction of ultimate power. But here's where the crime transcends simple robbery and becomes something more sinister. It becomes theater. Antoinette Frank, having exited through the back door with Lacaze, doesn't flee the scene. Instead, she drives to a nearby location, waits exactly 20 minutes, long enough for the bodies to cool, for blood to pool, for the restaurant to settle into the silence of death. Then she returns. Her patrol car arrives with lights flashing, radio crackling with official authority.
She steps out in full uniform, badge gleaming under the streetlights, and approaches the restaurant she left 20 minutes earlier as a killer. "Officer on scene," she radios to dispatch. "Multiple victims down. Need backup and ambulances immediately." She enters the restaurant, weapon drawn, playing the part of first responder with chilling precision. She checks pulses she knows will be absent, secures a scene she knows is safe, calls for backup to investigate crimes she committed. When other officers arrive, she briefs them with professional competence. 3 victims, appears to be robbery gone wrong, all canvas for witnesses. She takes notes, she photographs evidence, she comforts the surviving family members with words of sympathy and promises of justice. But survivor Cho Vu, hiding in the restaurant's back room during the massacre, had seen the killer's face clearly. And when Officer Frank returns 20 minutes later, asking questions and taking notes, Cho whispers the words that will unravel everything. "You killed my brother and sister." The Kim An restaurant wasn't chosen randomly. Antoinette Frank had eaten there before, knew the family's routines, understood their vulnerability. She also knew Officer Williams often stopped by after his shift, making him both witness and victim. This wasn't just about money. The robbery was ritual. The murders were message. The returning uniform was the ultimate display of power, standing over the bodies of her victims while wearing the badge of those sworn to catch killers like her. She'd found the perfect crime, or so she thought. Use her authority to access the scene, her uniform to deflect suspicion, her badge to investigate her own murders. Who would suspect a police officer of killing another police officer? Therefore, what should have been a simple robbery became an act of institutional betrayal that would haunt New Orleans for decades. Kim An Restaurant, March 5, 1995, 12:30 a.m. Detective Marco Dima arrives at the scene within an hour. Something feels wrong immediately, not just the violence, but the staging, the way Officer Frank positions herself, taking charge, directing the investigation. Her answers come too quickly, her knowledge too complete. But it's Cho Vu's whispered identification that breaks the case wide open. A survivor pointing at a uniformed officer and saying, "She did it." The words hang in the air like smoke from the murder weapon. Detectives begin connecting dots that should never have lined up. Frank's financial troubles, her relationship with Lacaze, her access to the restaurant, her intimate knowledge of the crime scene. The evidence cascades. Ballistics matching her service weapon, witness testimony placing her at the scene, phone records linking her to Lacaze. Each piece of proof drives another nail in the coffin of the thin blue line. But the most damning evidence is her return to the scene, an act of hubris that transforms clever criminal into sloppy murderer. New Orleans, March 5, 1995, morning. The headlines scream across Louisiana: "Cop kills cop. Badge of dishonor. Police officer charged in triple murder." Channel 4's morning anchor can barely contain her shock. In an unprecedented case that has rocked the New Orleans Police Department. The Times-Picayune's front page features Frank's booking photo next to Officer Williams' Academy graduation picture. Police Superintendent Richard Pennington calls an emergency press conference. The questions come like machine gun fire. How does she pass psychological screening? Why wasn't her relationship with Lakazi flagged? What other cases might be compromised?
The community's trust, already fragile in a city plagued by police corruption, shatters completely. If officers can't trust each other, how can citizens trust them? The badge, meant to inspire confidence, now inspires fear. Therefore, one woman's betrayal becomes an entire institution's credibility crisis. New Orleans Police Headquarters, March 5, 1995, 3:17 a.m. The interrogation room is deliberately stark. Fluorescent lights, metal table, recording equipment humming in the background. Detective Dema sits across from Officer Antoinette Frank, who still wears her uniform, though her badge has been removed. The question starts simple, procedural. Where were you?
When did you arrive at the scene? Then they tightened like a noose. Why did the survivor identify you? How do you explain the ballistics match? What was your relationship with Rogers Lacaze? Frank's composure cracks slowly, then all at once. The careful mask of the investigating officer falls away, revealing something colder underneath. Her confession, when it comes, is delivered with clinical detachment. I needed the money, she explains, as if discussing the weather. Williams was just in the wrong place. She describes the planning, the execution, the return to the scene, all without a flicker of remorse.
The tape recorder captures every word, preserving for history the moment a police officer admits to murdering the very people she swore to protect. But even in confession, she shows no understanding of the magnitude of her betrayal. Orleans Parish Criminal Court, September 1995. The trial of Antoinette Frank becomes a media circus. Reporters pack the courtroom, cameras line the courthouse steps. The nation watches as a police officer stands trial for murdering her partner. The prosecution's case is overwhelming. Physical evidence, witness testimony, Frank's own confession. The defense, led by court-appointed attorneys, struggles to find an angle that doesn't require defending the indefensible. Remarkably, they fail to present evidence of Frank's traumatic childhood, the abuse that warped her psyche, the failed psychological evaluations that should have kept her off the force. These details, which might have explained, if not excused, her actions, remain locked away in sealed files. On September 12, 1995, the jury returns guilty verdicts on all counts, 3 counts of first-degree murder. The judge sentences her to death, making her the only woman on Louisiana's death row. Rogers Lacaze, her co-conspirator, receives the same sentence. Officer Ronald Williams' family weeps in the gallery. The Vu family finally has justice, though it can never restore what they lost. But for Antoinette Frank, the trial's end is just the beginning of a different kind of sentence. Decades of appeals, legal challenges, and the slow machinery of capital punishment. 28 years later, Antoinette Frank remains on death row, the only woman in Louisiana awaiting execution. Her cell is small, Spartan, a far cry from the authority she once craved. The badge that should have represented her commitment to justice became the instrument of its destruction. Her case stands as a monument to institutional failure. How many red flags were ignored? How many warning signs dismissed? How many other Antoinette Franks walk among us, wearing uniforms they've already betrayed in their hearts? The Kim On restaurant has long since closed, but the memory of that night lingers in New Orleans East. 3 families destroyed, a community's trust shattered, a profession's honor stained. In the end, Antoinette Frank represents something more terrifying than random violence, the corruption of those we trust most. She didn't break into our homes. We invited her in. We gave her a badge, a gun, and our faith. The 5-pointed star meant to protect became a weapon pointed at the heart of justice itself. She didn't answer the call to serve.
She answered it with a bullet,